Preston stood at the head of the boardroom table, tie straight, hand already out for the shake that would make him rich. The doors opened. Every executive in the room stood up. Not for him. A tall Korean man walked in wearing a plain gray jacket, the kind you'd see on a warehouse floor, not in a room like this. An older woman near the window pressed her hand to her mouth. A junior associate dropped his pen and didn't pick it up. Preston's hand was still out. Nobody took it. Chairman Kong, the attorney said, and the room went quiet enough to hear the air conditioning. Preston looked at the man's face. He knew that face. He'd laughed at that face 3 weeks ago, at his own engagement party, in front of 40 people. Before we dive in, are you watching this alone, or is someone right there with you? And where are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your location in the comments. Welcome to Soul Root Stories. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had a name yet. Aloan Hart sat at the edge of her bed counting quarters into stacks of 4, lining them up on the nightstand like little soldiers. 28 years old, still in her scrubs from the hospital, hair pulled back tight because she hadn't had time to do anything else with it. The light bill sat open on the dresser, red letters across the top. The front door opened. Min Jae came in still wearing his warehouse badge, smelling like cardboard and cold air. He looked at the stacks of quarters, then at her. "That's not going to be enough," she said, not looking up. "I picked up an extra shift Thursday. You already worked 6 days this week." He sat down next to her, picked up one of the quarter stacks, and put it back down slightly off-center just to mess with her count. She swatted his hand. "I had it right. You always have it right." He kissed the side of her head. "That's the problem. You never let anything be wrong for even a second." She almost smiled. Almost. He got up, went to the stove, and started boiling water. 1 pack of ramen. He split it into 2 bowls anyway, giving her the bigger half like he always did, sliding 2 strips of egg from his side onto hers when he thought she wasn't looking. She was always looking. "Min Jae. Yeah. You do that every night. Give me more than you take." He shrugged, stirring his half. "You work 12-hour shifts holding people's hands while they're scared. I lift boxes. Feels fair to me. That's not how math works. It's how my math works." They ate on the floor, backs against the couch because the springs were shot, plates balanced on their knees. He told her about a guy at the warehouse who tried to microwave a burrito still in foil and set off the fire alarm. She laughed so hard she had to put her bowl down. He watched her laugh like it was the only good thing that had happened to him all week, because it was. 2 years earlier, this had started in a hospital hallway. He'd come in with his hand wrapped in a t-shirt, blood soaking through. No insurance card, telling the intake desk he could pay cash, just needed a minute to get to an ATM. Aloan had been the one behind the desk. She'd looked at his hand, looked at his face, and quietly covered $40 of his copay herself before he even got back from outside. He found out 3 weeks later, tracked down which coffee shop she liked from a nurse who talked too much, left an envelope with the exact amount, and a note. "You didn't know if I could pay you back. Thank you for letting that not matter." She kept that note in her wallet. Still had it. Now, on the floor of their apartment, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box, scratched at the corners like it had been carried around for a while, waiting for the right moment. "I know it's not much," he said. She opened it. A thin band, a stone so small you'd need good light to see it catch. "Min Jae, I know what it looks like next to what I want to give you. Ask me the question before I decide how I feel about the ring." He laughed, short and real. "Marry me." "Yes." She didn't let him finish getting off the floor before she said it. "Yes, obviously yes." He kissed her right there on the kitchen tile, ramen going cold on the counter behind them, and for a second neither of them thought about the light bill or the extra shift or any of it. The mail slot rattled 2 days later. Aloan picked up a thick cream envelope off the floor, gold lettering across the front. "Preston Calloway and Vivian Marsh request the pleasure of your company." Addressed to Aloan Hart plus guest. Not Aloan Hart and Min Jae Kong. Just guest. Like he didn't have a name worth printing. She stood there holding it, jaw tight. Min Jae came up behind her, read it over her shoulder, and went quiet for a second. "We don't have to go," she said. "We're going." He took the envelope, set it on the counter, calm as anything. "Let him see you happy. That's going to bother him more than anything either of us could say to his face." She looked at him, really looked, trying to figure out where he got that kind of calm from. Working 2 jobs, hands raw from lifting all day, and still able to say something like that without a shake in his voice. She didn't know yet that calm like that doesn't come from nowhere. She didn't know a lot of things yet. The venue took up the whole top floor of a hotel downtown. Glass walls, string quartet in the corner, waiters carrying trays of champagne that cost more per glass than Min-jae made in an hour. Aloan wore the one good dress she owned, the same one from 2 weddings ago. Min-jae wore a suit he'd rented that morning and would return the next day, so they didn't lose the deposit. Preston spotted them from across the room before they'd even taken off their coats. Aloan. He crossed the floor fast, arms out, kissing her cheek like they were still friends. You came. I wasn't sure you would. He turned to Min-jae, looked him up and down, slow, deliberate. And this must be. Min-jae said, offering his hand. Preston shook it, glanced at the cuff of the rented suit, and smiled like he'd found something funny. Min-jae, great. What is it you do? Warehouse work. Some driving. Right. Preston nodded like he was filing that away for later use. That's honest work. Good for you. He said it the way you'd praise a kid for tying his own shoes. A waiter came by with a tray. Preston took 2 glasses, handed one to Aloan, didn't offer one to Min-jae. Just moved on to the next thing, already waving at someone else across the room. They were seated near the kitchen doors. Every few minutes a server pushed through, and the whole table got a blast of noise and steam. Aloan recognized 2 women at their table, people she used to work events with, back before the hospital job. They looked at her like they were doing math in their heads, adding up the rented suit and the seat by the kitchen and coming up with an answer they felt sorry for. Aloan, honey, one of them said, leaning in like it was kindness. How are you 2 doing? Preston mentioned you'd had a rough year. We're doing fine, Aloan said. That's good. That's really good to hear. The way she said it made it clear she didn't believe a word of it. Preston tapped a fork against his glass at the head table, stood up to make a toast. He thanked his fiancé, thanked his parents, thanked the room for reminding him what real success looks like. His eyes found Aloan's table for half a second on that last part. Just long enough. Min-jae didn't react. He reached under the table and took Aloan's hand, thumb moving slow across her knuckles, and kept his eyes on his water glass. Across the room, an older Korean man in a dark suit stood near the bar, talking quietly with 2 people who looked like they worked for him. He glanced toward Min-jae's table once, then again. Min-jae caught the second glance and gave the smallest nod, barely a movement at all. The older man nodded back and returned to his conversation. Aloan saw it happen and filed it away without saying anything. Just a stranger. Probably nothing. After dinner, people mingled with drinks in hand, and Preston made his way back over, this time with his fiancée on his arm, Diamond catching every light in the room. So when's the big day for you 2? Vivian asked, sweet as poison. Or is that still TBD? We're taking our time, Aloan said. Doing it right, not fast. Smart, Preston said. Weddings get expensive. Better to wait until you can actually afford one. A couple people near them laughed, quiet, quick, gone before anyone could call it out directly. Aloan felt the heat come up her neck. She didn't look at Min-jae. She looked straight at Preston. You know what's funny, she said. I remember when you didn't have 2 nickels to your name either. I remember whose couch you slept on for 4 months while you got your business off the ground. The room got a little quieter. That's ancient history, Preston said, smile tightening at the corners. Sure is. Aloan took Min-jae's arm. Funny how fast people forget where they started once they think they've made it somewhere better. Preston's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Vivian pulled him toward the next conversation before it could go further. Min-jae looked at her, something warm breaking through the calm on his face. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. She smoothed the front of her dress, hands still not quite steady. I'm not embarrassed by you. Not for 1 second. I need you to know that. I know. I mean it, Min-jae. I know, he said again, softer this time, and pulled her hand up to his mouth, kissed her knuckles right there in the middle of the room, in front of everyone who'd been laughing 30 seconds ago. They left before dessert. In the car, she finally let her shoulders drop. I hate that room. I hate every person in that room. You didn't act like it. I wanted to throw a plate at his head. I know. That's why I love you. He pulled out of the parking garage, one hand on the wheel, the other still holding hers across the console. You never once looked at me like I was less than him in there. Not once. Why would I? You've never once made me feel like I was worth less than anybody in that room. Doesn't matter what you make an hour. He didn't say anything to that. Just squeezed her hand a little tighter and kept driving. And if she'd been watching his face instead of the road, she might have caught the look that crossed it, something between gratitude and guilt, like he was carrying a weight she couldn't see yet. She wouldn't find out what that weight was for 3 more weeks. And by then, everything about their life together would already be starting to come apart in ways neither of them could stop. The eviction notice came taped to the door on a Tuesday. Aloan pulled it off before Min-jae got home, folded it into fourths, and put it in her coat pocket. She sat at the kitchen table that night, doing math on the back of an envelope. Rent. His medication for the shoulder he'd hurt at the warehouse. Groceries, cut down to almost nothing already. No matter how she moved the numbers around, they didn't move far enough. She opened the drawer by her bed, took out a small wooden box, and lifted the lid. Her mother's necklace sat inside. Thin gold chain, small pendant shaped like a leaf. Her mother had worn it every day of her life until the day she died. Aloan hadn't taken it off the box in 2 years, just opened the lid sometimes to look at it. She closed the box, put on her coat, and walked 6 blocks to the pawn shop on Grant before she could talk herself out of it. The man behind the counter turned the necklace over twice under the light. $200. It's real gold. $225. Best I can do. She took the money. Didn't look at the necklace again once it went into the case behind the glass. Walked home with her hands in her pockets. Jaw set, telling herself it was just a thing. Things could be replaced. People couldn't. She paid the rent that Friday. Told the landlord it was a little late, but it was all there. Told Min-jae they'd caught up, didn't mention how. He found the empty box 3 days later, looking for his gloves in the drawer where she kept it. He stood in the bedroom doorway holding it open in his palm, like it might still have something in it if he waited long enough. Aloan. She came out of the bathroom, saw what he was holding, and didn't say anything at first. Where is it? He said. Not a question, really. He already knew. I handled the rent. Where is it? Grant Street. The pawn shop by the laundromat. She kept her voice even. Min-jae, it's fine. It's a necklace. It was your mother's. I know whose it was. Her voice cracked once, just once, and she pushed through it. I know exactly whose it was. That's why I did it, and not something else. I wasn't going to sell anything of yours. This was mine to give up. He set the empty box down on the dresser, slow, like it weighed more than it should have. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Just stood there with his hand still open where the box had been. I'm going to fix this, he said finally. You don't have to fix anything. It's done. I'm going to fix it, he said again, quieter, and there was something in the way he said it that didn't sound like an empty promise. It sounded like a plan. That night, past midnight, his phone rang. She heard it from the bedroom, heard him get up fast, heard the front door open and shut. Through the window, she watched him standing on the sidewalk below, phone to his ear, pacing 3 steps one way and 3 steps back, nodding at something the other person was saying like they could see him. He came back in 10 minutes later. Who was that? Work stuff. He got back into bed like nothing had happened, but his hand found hers under the blanket and held on tighter than usual. At midnight. Schedule change for tomorrow. Nothing. He kissed her forehead. Go back to sleep. She didn't push it. Something in her didn't want to know badly enough to fight for the answer. And something else, some old instinct she couldn't name, told her not to yet. 2 days later, they ran into Preston at the grocery store on 9th, of all places, him in a suit picking up something from the deli counter that cost more than their weekly food budget. He spotted them by the cereal aisle and made a show of coming over. Aloan. Small world. Preston. He glanced at their cart. Generic brand everything. A single pack of chicken thighs, the store brand bread. He didn't say anything about it. Didn't have to. You know, he said, I've got some connections downtown. Warehouse management, that kind of thing. Pays a lot better than loading trucks. I could put in a word if you want, Min-jae. We're good, Min-jae said. Even. Not a flicker. I'm just saying. No shame in taking help when you need it. There isn't, Min-jae agreed. We just don't need it. Preston smiled like he'd expected exactly that answer and had already moved past caring. Well, offer stands. He looked at Aloan one more time, something almost like pity in it, and walked off toward the registers. Aloan gripped the cart handle hard enough her knuckles went pale. I can't stand him. I know. He does that on purpose. Every time. Just to see if it still lands. It doesn't land, Min-jae said, pushing the cart forward, steady as ever. Not on me. Only thing that would ever really get to me is watching you believe him about anything. She looked over at him, at the calm on his face that never seemed to crack no matter what got thrown at it. And for the first time she let herself wonder, really wonder, where a man carrying that much weight found that much steadiness to give away. She still didn't ask. She'd find out soon enough, and when she did, it wouldn't come from him at all. Preston's office took up the whole top floor of a building on 6th, glass on 3 sides. A view of the whole financial district spread out below like a model train set. He stood at the window with his phone against his ear. "Tell me the Kong deal is locked." 95%, his assistant said. "Signings in 10 days. Biggest contract this firm's ever touched." 95 isn't 100. Legal's just finishing the last review. It's a formality at this point. Preston hung up and looked out at the skyline like he already owned a piece of it. 3 years of chasing this deal. 3 years of dinners and flights and smiling at people he didn't respect just to get a seat at their table. It was almost his. Across the ocean, in a boardroom in Seoul, CEO Eun sat at the head of a long table with 6 other executives, a laptop open in front of her showing Preston's company profile. She was in her late 50s, gray-streaked through dark hair pulled back tight, the kind of woman who'd earned every gray hair the hard way. "The numbers are strong," one of the executives said. "Revenue projections, client retention, all of it checks out." "The numbers aren't my concern," Eun said. She tapped the screen. "I want to know how he treats people who can't do anything for him. That's not something we usually measure. Maybe we should start." She closed the laptop. "Run the integrity review. Full 1. Employees, past partners, anyone who's worked under him. That'll take time we don't have. Signings in 10 days. Then we work fast." The family attorney, sitting 2 seats down, made a note on his pad without looking up. He'd worked for the Kong family for over 20 years. He knew that when Eun got that look on her face, arguing with her cost more time than doing what she said. Back home, Eloan sat across from Denise at the little diner on 41st, 2 coffees going cold between them. "He's been weird lately," Eloan said. "Taking calls outside. Coming back different. Not bad different. Just somewhere else." "Somewhere else how?" "Like he's thinking about 10 things at once and only telling me about one of them." Denise stirred sugar into coffee she wasn't drinking. "You ever think maybe he's stepping out on you?" "Don't. I'm just saying what people would say." "Then don't say what people would say. Say what you actually think." Denise looked at her for a second, softened. "I think you'd know if something was wrong. You always know." "I do know something's different. I just don't know what." Eloan wrapped both hands around her mug. "But I'll tell you what I don't feel. I don't feel like he's pulling away from me. Not for 1 second. Man still holds my hand like he's scared I'll disappear if he lets go." "So what is it then?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not that he loves me less." She said it plain, no doubt in it at all. "I watched that man give me the bigger half of a $2 meal for 2 years straight. Watched him work through a torn shoulder because he wouldn't take a sick day and lose the hours. If he's hiding something, it's not because he stopped caring. It's something else." Denise raised her eyebrows. "You sound pretty sure for someone who doesn't know what it is." "I am sure. Some things you don't need proof of. You just know it in your body." Eloan finally took a sip of the cold coffee, made a face, pushed it away. "I didn't fall in love with him because things were easy. I fell in love with him watching him carry things that weren't easy at all and never once take it out on me." That night, Min-jae came home late again, jacket smelling like the outside air, phone going quiet the second he walked through the door like he'd ended a call right before he came in. He kissed her, asked about her shift, listened to every word of her answer like nothing else in the world was happening. But later, lying in the dark, she felt him still awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. "Min-jae, yeah. Whatever's going on with you. I'm not asking you to tell me right now if you're not ready." He turned his head toward her in the dark. "I just need you to know," she said, "that there's nothing you could tell me that would make me love you less. I need you to actually believe that, because I think maybe you don't." He was quiet for a long moment. She heard him breathe out, slow, like he was letting something go. "There's something coming," he said finally. "Something I have to deal with. I can't explain it yet, but when I can, I will. I promise you that." "Is it bad?" "No." He pulled her closer, chin resting on top of her head. "It's not bad. It's just big. Bigger than I know how to explain right now without you thinking I'm someone I'm not. You could never be someone you're not to me. I already know who you are." He didn't answer that. just held her tighter, and she felt something in his chest that might have been him fighting back tears, or might have been him fighting back a truth he'd been carrying alone for longer than she knew. She fell asleep in his arms that night, not knowing it was the last ordinary night they'd have for a long time. If you're feeling this story so far, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from tonight. Hit like if you're rooting for Eloan and Min-jae, and subscribe to Soul Root Stories so you don't miss what happens next, because everything is about to change. The car came for Eloan on a Wednesday morning, black, unmarked, a driver in a plain suit standing by the back door when she opened her front door to leave for work. "Miss Hart, I'm here to bring you to the Kong Group Tower. Min-jae asked me to come." "The what tower?" "Kong Group. Downtown. He said it was important." She almost said no. Almost told the man he had the wrong address. But something in her gut, some quiet certainty that had been building for weeks, told her to get in the car. The building took up half a block, glass going up further than she could see from the sidewalk. The lobby alone was bigger than her whole apartment building. A woman at the front desk knew her name before she said it, walked her straight to an elevator, pressed a button for the top floor. The doors opened onto a boardroom full of people in suits, standing around a long table like they were waiting for someone. Min-jae stood near the window. He was wearing a suit that actually fit him, dark gray, clean lines, nothing rented about it. He turned when the doors opened, and every bit of tension left his face at once. "Eloan, what is this?" She didn't move from the elevator. "Min-jae, what is this place?" The family attorney stepped forward, a folder in his hands. "Ms. Hart, my name is. I don't care who you are. I want him to tell me." She looked past the attorney straight at Min-jae. "Tell me right now." Min-jae crossed the room and took both her hands. "This is my family's company. Kong Group. My grandfather built it. I'm the only one left to run it." "Your family's?" She pulled her hands back half an inch, not all the way, just enough to look at him different. "You've been sleeping on a mattress on the floor. You've been eating half a bowl of ramen, so I could have more. I know. You let me sell my mother's necklace. I know." His voice cracked on that one. "I know exactly what that cost you. I was there for every bit of it." Eun-young stepped forward, folder under her arm. "Miss Hart, may I explain? It might make this easier." Eloan didn't answer, just stared at Min-jae like she was trying to find the man she knew somewhere in the stranger standing in front of her in an expensive suit. "His grandfather," Eun-young said, "wrote a condition into his will before he passed. Min-jae could not touch this company, or this family's money, until he found someone who loved him without knowing any of it. Someone who chose him with nothing to gain. So this was a test." Eloan's voice went flat. "I was a test." "No," Min-jae said, fast, sharp. "You were never a test to me. The condition was real. My love for you was never the part that was fake." "How long, Min-jae? How long were you going to let me believe we were struggling to make rent while you had this the whole time?" "I didn't have it. That's the point. I couldn't touch a single dollar of it until the board confirmed the condition was met. I've lived exactly the life you've watched me live for 2 years. Every shift, every missed meal, every night we sat on that floor because the couch was broken, none of that was an act. I needed it to be real. So I let it be real." She looked down at her hand, at the small ring he'd given her on the kitchen floor, the one that cost almost nothing next to anything in this room. "The phone calls," she said. "Late at night. That was this. Wasn't it? The board. My grandfather's attorney. People checking whether I was following the terms." He stepped closer, careful, like she might step back. "I couldn't tell you any of it without breaking the one condition that mattered most. I had to let you love a man with nothing, because that's the only way anyone could ever know for sure it wasn't the money you wanted." Her eyes were wet now, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "I sold my mother's necklace, Min-jae. I stood in that pawn shop and put it on the counter because I thought we needed $200 to keep our lights on. And you're telling me you could have stopped that with one phone call?" "Yes. And you didn't." "I didn't." He said it plain, no excuse behind it. And that honesty was somehow worse and better than anything softer would have been. "I watched you do it, and I let you. Because stopping you would have meant lying about who I was, and I couldn't build a life with you on a lie." She turned away from him, walked to the window, looked out at the city from higher up than she'd ever stood in her life. The room stayed quiet behind her. Nobody moved. "I feel like an idiot," she said finally, not turning around. "Standing here. Everybody in this room knew who you were. Knew what this was building to. And I was home doing math on the back of an envelope, trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. You're not an idiot. He came up behind her, didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel him there. You're the only person in 2 years who never once asked me what I could do for her. That's not something an idiot does. That's the rarest thing I've ever seen in my life. She still didn't turn around. The hardest part, he said, quiet now, just for her, was never pretending to be poor. I know how to work hard. I know how to go without. What was hard was standing next to you every single day, watching you believe you weren't enough. Watching you think a man like Preston had something you couldn't compete with. You were never behind, alone. You were the whole reason any of this meant something. She turned around then, finally, tears on her face, and looked at him like she was seeing two men at once, the one from the warehouse and the one standing in this boardroom, and trying to figure out if they could really be the same person. I need air, she said. Alone. I need air, Min-jae. That's all. I'm not leaving you. I just need a minute that isn't in this room. She walked past him toward the elevator, and every executive in the room stepped back to let her through, and Min-jae stood there and let her go, because if 2 years had taught him anything, it was that pushing a lone heart never got you anywhere good. He just hoped to God she came back. She stood on the sidewalk outside the tower for 20 minutes, arms crossed, watching people in suits move past her like she was invisible. Nobody noticed a hospital worker in scrubs standing outside a billion-dollar building having the worst morning of her life. Her phone rang. Denise. Girl, where are you? You didn't show up for shift. They're calling around. I'm not coming in today. What happened? Eloan looked up at the glass tower, sun bouncing off it so bright she had to squint. Min-jae's rich, Denise. Like, actual rich. His family owns this whole company. I'm standing outside it right now. Silence on the line. Then, come again. You heard me. Eloan, are you being pranked right now? I wish. She hung up before Denise could say anything else, put the phone in her pocket, and stood there a while longer, until the anger started to burn down into something quieter, something she could actually think through. She thought about the necklace, about the coffee shop note in her wallet, about 2 years of a man giving her the bigger half of everything he had, even when everything he had wasn't much. And she thought about how none of that had changed in the last 20 minutes. He hadn't lied about loving her. He'd lied about a bank account. She went back inside. The boardroom had mostly cleared out by the time she got back up there. Min-jae was alone by the window, jacket off, tie loosened, looking like a man waiting for a verdict. You came back, he said. I told you I would. He didn't move toward her, let her close the distance on her own terms. She walked up, stood in front of him, arms still crossed. I'm angry, she said. I know. I'm going to be angry for a while. This isn't a 5-minute thing. I know that too. But I didn't fall in love with a bank account, Min-jae. I fell in love with a man who split his ramen so I'd have more. That man's still standing right here. I checked. He didn't go anywhere. He reached for her hand, slow, and she let him take it. I need you to never do that again, she said. Whatever comes next, whatever this life turns out to look like, you don't get to carry something that big by yourself and let me find out from a room full of strangers. I won't. I mean it. I know you do. That's why I won't. He pulled her in, forehead against hers. There's nothing left to hide now. You know all of it. She let herself breathe for what felt like the first time in 20 minutes. Okay, she said. Okay. Across town, Preston sat in his office reading a text from a colleague. Have you seen the news? Kong Group announcing new chairman today. He clicked the link without much interest, expecting some name he didn't know. The photo loaded. He sat back, so hard his chair rolled into the window. His assistant knocked and came in without waiting. Sir, legal is online too. They're saying the Kong deal. I see it, Preston said, voice flat. They're saying there's an issue with the integrity review. They want a call tomorrow morning. An integrity review. He laughed, short and bitter. For 3 years I sent that family birthday gifts. I flew to Seoul 4 times. I did everything right. Sir, I don't think this is about the numbers. Preston didn't answer. He was still looking at the photo on his screen. Min-jae Kong. New chairman, Kong Group. The man from the party. The man in the rented suit he'd made fun of in front of 40 people. The man whose fiancé he'd humiliated over champagne he never offered to share. He picked up his phone and called Vivian. You need to see something, he said. If you're loving how this story is unfolding, make sure you hit that like button and drop a comment telling us who you're rooting for. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Soul Roots Stories, because what happens to Preston next is something you do not want to miss. The call with the board came the next morning at 9 sharp. Preston walked in with a folder full of numbers, ready to defend every projection, every clause, every dollar of the deal he'd spent 3 years building. Nobody at the table asked him a single question about the numbers. Eun-young sat at the head of the table, laptop open in front of her, the same laptop from the Seoul meeting weeks earlier. Mr. Calloway, we've completed our independent integrity review of your company. I'm familiar with the standard review process. We passed compliance 8 months ago. This isn't compliance. This is character. She turned the laptop slightly so he could see the screen, a list of names, dates, incident reports. 14 former employees. 12 former vendors. Consistent pattern across 5 years. Pattern of what? Of how you treat people who can't do anything for you. She scrolled through without looking at him. An assistant fired by text message the day after her father's funeral because she took a personal call during a client meeting. A vendor's payment withheld 90 days past terms after the vendor's company already delivered because you wanted better leverage on the next contract. A junior associate you called, quote, useless furniture, in an email that got forwarded to 11 people. Preston's jaw tightened. Everyone makes mistakes under pressure. This isn't one mistake, Mr. Calloway. This is a pattern spanning years. The Kong Group has built its name over 3 generations on treating people with respect, regardless of what they can offer us. We are not interested in partnering with a company whose leadership doesn't share that value. This is because of Aloan. He said it before he could stop himself. This is Min Jae getting even. You expect me to believe this is really about some assistant I fired 2 years ago? Chairman Kong isn't in this room, Eun-young said. He recused himself from this decision the moment he learned of the personal connection. This decision was made by the board, based entirely on the review. You lost this deal because of how you built your company, Mr. Calloway, not because of who you know. Preston sat back in his chair, the folder of numbers still closed in front of him, useless now. He thought about the party, about the rented suit, about the way he'd smiled saying good for you like it cost him nothing to be kind, and he'd chosen not to spend it anyway. That's it then, he said. That's it. Eun-young confirmed, and closed her laptop. Preston sat alone in his office long after the board call ended. The city spread out below him the same as it always had, except now none of it felt like it belonged to him the way it had that morning. His assistant knocked, opened the door a crack. Sir, there's a reporter from the business desk asking for comment on the Kong deal falling through. Tell them no comment. They're saying it might already be a story by tonight. I said no comment. His voice came out sharper than he meant it. She closed the door without another word. He pulled up the article about the new chairmanship again, scrolled past the photo this time, down to a smaller paragraph near the bottom. Chairman Kong is engaged to Aloan Hart, a hospital administrator, whom he credits as the reason he was able to fulfill the conditions of his grandfather's will. He read that line 3 times. He thought about the grocery store, offering her a job connection like he was doing her a favor, watching her cart with the generic bread, and thinking he understood exactly where she stood in the world compared to him. He thought about the party, the seat by the kitchen door, the laugh that went around the table when he made that joke about weddings getting expensive. He hadn't seen anything. He'd seen a rented suit and a cart full of cheap food and decided that told him everything worth knowing about a person. He closed the laptop and didn't open it again that night. Back at the apartment, they still hadn't moved, hadn't rushed toward anything bigger. Aloan sat on the floor against the couch with the same cracked springs, a small box in her lap that had arrived by courier an hour earlier. Min Jae sat down next to her, still in his work clothes out of habit, even though he hadn't worked a shift in 3 days. Open it, he said. She lifted the lid. Her mother's necklace sat inside, chain and pendant exactly as she remembered them. I bought it back the same week, he said. Went to the shop myself, 3 days after I found the empty box. I've had it since. You had this the whole time, while I was still grieving it. I wanted to give it back to you the right way, not just hand it over like it was nothing. It's not nothing. I know what it cost you to let it go. She lifted it out, turned it over once in her fingers. Underneath, folded at the bottom of the box, sat a piece of paper, old, the creases soft from being folded and unfolded many times before it ever reached her. What's this? My grandfather wrote it before he died. He never got to meet you, but he knew someone like you might exist someday. and he wanted whoever it was to have this. She unfolded it carefully. To whoever my grandson chooses, I built everything I had from almost nothing, and I watched money take nearly everyone I loved and turn them into people I didn't recognize. I don't know your name. I don't need to. If you're reading this, it means you loved him before you knew what he had to offer you. And that means you gave him something I spent my whole life looking for and never fully found. The company was never the inheritance that mattered most. This was, take care of him. He is worth more than anything I'm leaving behind. Aloan read it twice, hand pressed flat against her chest by the end. He never even knew who I was, she said. He knew exactly who you were. He just didn't know your name yet. She put the necklace on, fingers shaking slightly at the clasp until he reached over and did it for her, fingers steady where hers weren't. What happens now, she said. The company, all of it. What does our life actually look like? Whatever we build together. That doesn't change because of a boardroom. He took her hand, same as he had 100 times before, in this same apartment, on this same worn-out floor. You don't have to move into some tower if you don't want to. You don't have to become someone different because I have to. I just need you next to me. That part was never going to change, no matter what came out of that will. She leaned into him, necklace cool against her collarbone. And for the first time since the boardroom, she felt like the ground under her had stopped shifting. 3 miles away, Preston stood in his living room with the television on, the volume low, watching a business channel run a segment on the new chairmanship. A photo came up of Min Jae and Aloan together, an older photo, taken outside the hospital where she worked, nothing staged about it, just two people standing close, laughing at something outside the frame. The anchor's voice came through low and even. Sources say Kong built his reputation not through the family name, but through 2 years working alongside everyday people, a period colleagues describe as the making of a genuinely different kind of leader. Preston set his drink down without finishing it. He didn't lose the deal because Min Jae had more money. He'd known men with more money his whole career and never once lost a deal to any of them. He lost it because somewhere along the way he'd stopped being able to tell the difference between people who mattered and people who didn't, and he'd built his whole life on that difference without ever noticing the cost. He picked the remote up and turned the television off. The apartment went dark around him, and he sat there a long while in the quiet, finally understanding, too late to do anything about it. Exactly what he'd thrown away in that boardroom, at that party, in every small moment he'd chosen to look down instead of look closer. Across town, Aloan fell asleep against Min Jae's shoulder on the floor of their small apartment, mother's necklace resting against her skin, ring that cost almost nothing still on her finger, exactly where it had been since the night he asked her on the kitchen tile. He stayed awake a while longer, watching her sleep, thinking about everything his grandfather had written in that letter, and knowing without any doubt at all that he'd found exactly what the old man spent his whole life looking for. He hadn't found it in a boardroom. He'd found it in a $2 bowl of ramen, split down the middle, with the bigger half always going to her. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Soul Roots Stories, because more stories like this one are coming your way soon.